The arena on Korvax Prime was bigger than anything Hana had ever seen in her life. The massive dome could hold 2 million screaming aliens, and every single seat was filled. The sand covering the arena floor was deep red from centuries of spilled blood, and the walls were decorated with thousands of skulls from fighters who had died in this place. When the heavy metal gates opened and Hana stepped into the bright sunlight, the crowd erupted in laughter. She looked tiny compared to the massive arena around her. Her human body seemed pathetic and weak next to the alien spectators who filled the stands. Some of them were pointing at her and making jokes in languages she could not understand. The arena announcer was a creature with 6 arms and a voice that could be heard across the entire dome. Ladies and gentlemen, behold the newest sacrifice to our glorious games, a human female from the primitive world called Earth. She has been sent here to die for your entertainment. More laughter filled the air, and Hana felt her face burn with anger, but she kept walking toward the center of the arena. Her 3 weeks on the transport ship had been spent planning and preparing. She had studied every recording of arena fights she could get her hands on. She had exercised in her tiny cell until her muscles ached. She had turned her rage into focus and her fear into determination. The betting screens around the arena showed the odds for her first fight. 1,000 to 1 against the human. Most aliens were not even bothering to place bets because they thought the fight would be over in seconds. The smart money was on how quickly she would die, not whether she would survive. Her first opponent entered through the opposite gate, and the crowd went wild with excitement. Vex, the Krellian beast warrior, stood 9 feet tall and weighed at least 400 pounds. His natural armor plates covered most of his body like living metal, and his claws were each as long as Hana's entire hand. The beast had won 47 fights in various arenas across the galaxy and had never been defeated. The weapon master approached Hana with a selection of blades and clubs, but she shook her head and pointed to a simple combat knife. It was barely 6 inches long and looked like a toy compared to Vex's natural weapons. The crowd laughed even harder when they saw her choice. "Are you certain, human?" the weapon master asked. "This creature has killed champions twice your size." Hana nodded and took the small blade. She had learned long ago that in a real fight the weapon that mattered most was the one between your ears. Everything else was just tools. The starting horn sounded and Vex immediately charged forward like a living tank. His plan was simple: use his size and strength to crush the tiny human before she could even think about fighting back. His claws swept through the air in massive arcs that would have cut her in half if they had connected, but Hana was not where he expected her to be. While Vex charged forward in a straight line, she rolled to the side and came up behind his left knee. The Krellian armor was thick and strong, but it had joints where the plates connected, and those joints needed to be flexible to allow movement. Her combat knife slid into the gap behind his knee and found the soft tissue underneath. Vex roared in pain and surprise and swung around to face her, but she was already moving again. His own momentum worked against him as he tried to turn too quickly on his wounded leg. The crowd started to quiet down as they realized this was not going to be the quick execution they had expected. The human was fighting smart instead of trying to match strength with strength. She was using speed and intelligence to avoid his attacks while looking for weaknesses in his defenses. Vex tried to grab her with his massive hands, but Hana slipped between his fingers like water. She climbed up his arm and drove her knife into another joint, in his armor, this time at the shoulder. The beast warrior tried to shake her off, but she held on tight and kept working at the weak points in his protection. For 15 minutes, the fight continued, with Hana slowly wearing down her massive opponent. She never tried to block his attacks head-on. Instead, she dodged and moved and struck at the places where his armor could not protect him. The crowd grew more and more silent as they watched their champion struggle against a creature they had dismissed as worthless. Finally, Vex made a mistake. Born from frustration and pain, he lunged forward with both arms extended, trying to grab the human who had been tormenting him. But Hana was ready for this move. She dropped flat on her back and drove both feet up into his wounded knee while simultaneously bringing her knife up into the soft spot under his chin. The great Krellian warrior crashed to the sand with a sound like thunder. His own weight and momentum had done most of the work. Hana had simply been smart enough to let physics help her. The arena fell completely silent as the crowd realized what they had just witnessed. The arena medics rushed out to check on Vex and declared him defeated but alive. The rules stated that fighters did not have to kill their opponents unless specifically ordered to do so. Hana stood over the fallen warrior, breathing hard, but victorious. Her second fight came 3 days later against a Zelkori acid spitter. These creatures could shoot streams of corrosive liquid from glands in their throats, and their skin was naturally resistant to most weapons. The betting odds were still heavily against the human, but they had dropped to 100 to 1. This time, Hana chose a longer sword and a small metal shield. The Zelkori fighter was confident and started the match by shooting streams of acid in her direction. But Hana had studied the recordings of previous fights. She knew that acid spitters had limited ammunition and needed time to regenerate their supply. She spent the first part of the fight running and dodging, forcing her opponent to waste his acid shots on empty air. When his supply ran low, she moved in close where his ranged attacks were useless. Her sword found the gaps in his hide, and the fight was over in minutes. The third fight was against a cybernetically enhanced Thronak warrior, covered in metal implants and armed with energy weapons. But technology had weaknesses too, and Hana had learned during her military career that the more complex a system was, the more ways it could break. She used the metal walls of the arena to short-circuit his energy weapons with reflected shots. Then she got close enough to find the control cables connecting his implants to his nervous system. A few precise cuts with her blade, and the mighty cyborg became just another confused alien stumbling around in the sand. By her 10th victory, the whispers had started spreading through the arena. The human fought differently than anyone had ever seen. She did not rely on strength or size or advanced technology. Instead, she used intelligence and planning to turn her opponent's strengths into weaknesses. The arena masters began to take notice, too. They started giving her better weapons and armor, not because they cared about her survival, but because dead champions did not sell tickets. The crowds that had once laughed at her now leaned forward in anticipation whenever she entered the ring. Other fighters in the holding cells started watching her training sessions. They had never seen anyone prepare for battle the way she did. She would spend hours studying recordings of her next opponent, looking for patterns and weaknesses, while other fighters just relied on their natural abilities. After her 15th victory, even the guards began treating her differently. They still kept her locked up, but they spoke to her with respect instead of mockery. They had seen too many champions fall to this small human to think of her as harmless anymore. But Hana knew this was only the beginning. She had won 15 fights out of the 100 she needed to survive. The real challenges were still ahead of her, and the arena masters would not keep giving her weak opponents forever. Soon they would start sending their best warriors against her. Still, as she lay in her cell after another victory, she allowed herself a small smile. The aliens had expected her to die quickly and quietly. Instead, she was teaching them something they had never learned before. Never underestimate a human who has nothing left to lose. The heavy metal chains cut into Lee Hana's wrists as she stood before the massive alien council chamber. The ceiling stretched so high above her head that she could barely see the top, and the walls were made of some kind of black stone that seemed to absorb all light around it. 12 different alien species sat in towering chairs that made them look like giants. Looking down at a small child, Hana kept her back straight, even though her military uniform was torn and covered in dried blood from the battle 3 days ago. The battle where humanity lost everything. The battle where Earth forces were crushed so completely that surrender was the only option left. Her left arm was still broken from when that alien war machine had thrown her against a wall, but she refused to show any weakness in front of these creatures. The largest alien in the room was something called a Vorthak commander. His skin looked like black rock, and he had 4 massive arms that ended in claws, sharp enough to cut through steel. When he spoke, his voice sounded like rocks grinding together, and it echoed through the chamber, making Hana feel even smaller than she already was. "We have decided the terms for your pathetic species' survival," he said, looking down at her with eyes that glowed red in the darkness. "Your people fought us and lost badly. Now you must pay the price for your foolishness." Ambassador Park Minho stood beside Hana, trying to look brave, but she could see his hands shaking. The man had been a diplomat for 20 years, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. When the aliens had first arrived 6 months ago, he had tried to negotiate. He had offered them trade agreements, technology sharing, even mining rights to half of Earth's resources. None of it had mattered. The aliens wanted only one thing: complete surrender. "What are your terms?" Minho asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The Vorthok commander leaned forward in his chair and smiled, showing teeth like broken glass. "You will send one warrior to the grand arena of Korvax Prime. This warrior will fight other champions from worlds we have conquered. If your champion can survive 100 battles, your species will be granted basic rights as slaves. If your champion fails, Earth burns." The words hit Hana like a physical blow. 100 battles. She had studied military history her entire life and knew that no human had ever survived more than a dozen fights against alien warriors. The creatures in this room were each twice her size and 3 times as strong. Their technology was centuries ahead of anything Earth had developed. "How long do we have to decide?" Minho asked. "You have already decided," the Vorthok commander said, standing up to his full height of nearly 10 feet. "The warrior has been chosen. We want her." He pointed one of his clawed hands directly at Hana. Hana felt her heart skip a beat. She looked at Minho and saw the truth in his eyes. They had already made this decision before bringing her here. She was not here as a representative of humanity. She was here as a sacrifice. But Sir Minho started to say. "Silence," the alien commander roared. The human female Li Hana was captured during the battle for the outer colonies. She was commanding the defense of 3 planets when our forces arrived. Her ships were destroyed, her soldiers killed, and she was taken prisoner. She has already been declared dead by your own military. The words were true, and Hana knew it. Her last mission had been a disaster from the start. High Command had sent her fleet to defend 3 mining colonies, knowing full well it was a suicide mission. The aliens had sent 50 ships against her 12. They had fought for 18 hours before the last of her vessels was destroyed. She had been the only survivor. "We chose her because she is expendable," Minho said quietly, not looking at Hana as he spoke. "Your people believe she is already dead, so her actual death in the arena will cause no additional suffering." Hana wanted to scream at him, to fight back, to demand better terms, but she knew it would be useless. The aliens held all the power here. Earth had lost the war completely. Their cities were in ruins, their fleets destroyed, and their armies scattered. The only reason these creatures were even offering this deal was because they enjoyed watching other species fight to the death for their entertainment. The Vorthok commander walked down from his platform until he was standing directly in front of Hana. Even though she was tall for a human, he still towered over her. "You will be taken to Korvax Prime tomorrow," he said. "The arena masters will explain the rules to you, but know this. Human champions never last long. The longest any human has survived is 37 battles, and that was centuries ago." 37 battles, Hana thought to herself. That means somewhere in the galaxy, there had been other humans who had been forced into this same situation, other people who had been sent to die for the entertainment of these creatures. The commander continued speaking, but Hana stopped listening. She was thinking about her younger brother, Kim Junho, who was probably back on Earth right now, watching the news feeds and wondering if his sister was still alive. She thought about all the human colonies that had been destroyed in the first wave of attacks. Millions of people turned to ash in seconds because humanity had dared to explore the stars. What she felt building inside her chest was not fear. It was anger. A cold, burning rage that started in her stomach and spread through her entire body. These aliens thought humans were weak. They thought humans would break easily under pressure. They had no idea what they were dealing with. Meeting ended with more threats and promises of destruction. If Earth tried to interfere with the arena matches, Hana was dragged away by 4 alien guards who were careful not to get too close to her, even though she was chained and wounded. They had heard stories about human unpredictability and did not want to take chances, as they pushed her into a cramped prison cell aboard their transport ship. Hana could hear the aliens talking and laughing in the corridor outside. They were making bets on how quickly she would die. Most thought she would last maybe 5 fights before becoming another corpse on the arena floor. But as the ship lifted off from Earth and began the long journey to Korvax Prime, Hana began to plan. She had 3 weeks to prepare for the fight of her life. 3 weeks to figure out how to turn her human weaknesses into strengths. The aliens expected her to die quickly and quietly. That was their first mistake. Their second mistake was thinking that humans fought fair when their backs were against the wall. Hana closed her eyes and began to remember everything she had learned in 20 years of military service. Every dirty trick, every desperate tactic, every piece of battlefield wisdom that had kept her alive when others had died. She thought about her brother, about her dead soldiers, about the burning colonies, and let that anger fuel her planning. They were sending her to die in the alien arena, but she had no intention of making it easy for them. The rigged fight should have killed Hana, but instead it showed the galaxy something they had never seen before. A human who refused to die quietly. Her challenge to fight multiple opponents at once spread across every world faster than the fastest. Ships could travel, slave species whispered about it in hidden places while their masters tried to pretend they were not worried. The Galactic Council argued for days about what to do. Some wanted to refuse her challenge and end the games early, but that would make them look weak. Others wanted to send so many fighters that her death would be certain, but that would prove they were cheating. The decision finally came from Overlord Krath, who smiled his cruel smile and agreed to her terms. "We will give her what she wants," he announced to the other council members. 5 opponents for fight 95, 7 for fight 96, and so on, until she faces 15 warriors in her final battle. She wants to die like a hero, so we will make sure she dies screaming. The arena masters brought in the deadliest fighters from across the galaxy, veterans who had never lost a battle. Creatures so dangerous they were kept locked away except for emergencies. War machines built to destroy armies. The betting was suspended because everyone knew this was not really a contest anymore. When the gates opened for Fight 95, Hana faced 5 elite killers at once. A Vorthak war chief who had crushed rebellions on dozens of worlds, a cyber-enhanced assassin with metal claws and computer reflexes, a hulking beast warrior bred for nothing but violence, a mind reader who could predict enemy moves, and a creature made of living crystal that could not be hurt by normal weapons. The crowd expected to watch her die in seconds. Instead, they saw something impossible. Hana did not try to fight all 5 opponents at the same time. She made them fight each other. First, she insulted the Vorthak war chief in front of the mind reader, making the proud alien believe his ally was planning to betray him. When the war chief attacked the psychic warrior, she used the confusion to sabotage the cyber assassin's power systems. The beast warrior charged at her, but she rolled aside and let him crash into the crystal creature. Within minutes, the 5 greatest champions in the arena were destroying each other while Hana stayed just out of reach. She knew exactly which insults would enrage which species. She understood how pride and fear could be turned into weapons. She had studied alien psychology during her weeks of captivity, and now she used that knowledge to deadly effect. Fight 96 brought 7 opponents, but the result was the same. Hana turned their numbers against them. She caused a power overload that blinded 3 fighters at once. She collapsed part of the arena wall to trap 2 others. She even managed to redirect an energy weapon blast so it hit the wrong target. The crowd began to understand they were seeing something that had never happened before. This was not just fighting. This was warfare at a level they could barely comprehend. The human was using everything around her as a weapon, including the minds of her enemies. By Fight 98, even some aliens in the audience were cheering for her. They had come to watch an execution, but instead they were witnessing the birth of a legend. Veterans who had fought in 100 battles sat with their mouths hanging open as they watched tactics they had never imagined. The Galactic Council grew more desperate with each victory. Some members suggested calling off the remaining fights, but it was too late to stop now. The entire galaxy was watching, and backing down would destroy their authority forever. Others wanted to send their personal armies into the arena, but that would start a civil war among the council species. For the 100th and final fight, they made a decision that would haunt them forever. They opened the deepest vault beneath the arena and brought out something that had been buried for over 1,000 years. The Worldbreaker was a war machine from the ancient conflicts that had shaped the galaxy. It stood 30 feet tall and carried weapons powerful enough to crack planets as the massive construct entered the arena. Spectators began fleeing in panic. This thing had been locked away because it was too dangerous to use even in the worst wars. Its main cannon could punch holes through battleships, and its smaller weapons could level city blocks. The arena had never seen anything like it. Hana looked up at the towering machine and felt fear for the first time since her capture began. This was not a fighter or even a group of fighters. This was a weapon of mass destruction, designed to end civilizations. But as she studied its ancient design, she began to see possibilities that its builders had never considered. The battle began with explosions that shook the entire dome. The Worldbreaker's weapons turned sections of the arena into molten glass and tore chunks out of the walls. Hana ran and dodged, while the machine methodically tried to eliminate her with firepower that could have destroyed a small city. But she had learned something important during her time fighting aliens. Their greatest weakness was not military or technological. It was their inability to think like humans. They built their weapons to be powerful and efficient, but they did not plan for someone who would fight dirty for 30 minutes. She avoided the machine's attacks while studying its weak points. Every ancient construct had safety systems built in to prevent catastrophic failures. The Worldbreaker was so old that its original programmers were long dead, but their safeguards were still there waiting for someone smart enough to find them. The machine was overheating from continuous use, and its cooling systems were working at maximum capacity. That gave Hana an idea that would have terrified its creators. She used her combat knife to damage the coolant lines that kept the power core stable. What happened next was beyond anything the arena had ever seen. The Worldbreaker did not just explode, it created a chain reaction that brought down half the dome. Massive sections of ceiling crashed to the sand below, and fires spread through the damaged structure. When the smoke finally cleared, Hana stood alone in the wreckage. The few spectators who had not fled sat in absolute silence. They had just watched a single human destroy not only their most powerful weapon but their most sacred arena as well. This was no longer entertainment. This was something that would change the galaxy forever. Standing in the ruins of what had once been a symbol of alien power, Hana looked up at the council box where the surviving leaders sat in shock. She knew her words would be broadcast to every world in known space, and she chose them carefully. "Your 100 fights are finished," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the damaged arena. "You promised humanity freedom if I survived, but we both know you never planned to keep that promise. You killed my brother and your ambassador, and you cheated every way you could." She paused to let her words sink in before continuing. "So now, I make you a promise. The galaxy thinks humans are weak because we are small. But today you learned something new. You learned that humans never surrender, and we never forget those who hurt our families. This is not the end." She continued, looking directly at the camera drones that were recording everything. "This is the beginning. The real war starts now. Not for freedom, but for justice. Every dead colony, every broken promise, every murdered human will be answered. Your empire made one mistake. You let one of us live long enough to teach the galaxy what humans can do when you push us too far." As alien security forces finally moved in to surround her, Hana smiled. The arena games were over, but something much bigger was just beginning. She had not just won her freedom. She had lit a fire that would burn across the stars. The Galactic Council had wanted entertainment. Instead, they had created the one thing that could bring down their empire. They had sent her to die in their arena. Now she was going home to show them what humans did to those who threatened their family. 93 victories. 7 more fights and Hana would achieve what no champion in arena history had ever accomplished. She would complete 100 battles and earn freedom for her species. But the Galactic Council had no intention of letting that happen. In the highest tower of the Council complex on Korvax Prime, the 12 most powerful beings in the galaxy sat around a table made from the bones of extinct species. The emergency meeting had been called by Overlord Krath, the cruelest, member of the Vorthak leadership whose reputation for brutality was legendary, even among his own people. "This human cannot be allowed to succeed," Krath said, his forearms gesturing angrily. "The slave uprisings have spread to 47 worlds in the past month. Our military forces are stretched thin, trying to contain the rebellions. If she wins her 100th fight, the entire galaxy will explode into revolution, but we cannot simply execute her," said Councillor Vex of the Thronok Collective. "The arena laws have been sacred for over 2,000 years. If we break them now, our own people will lose faith in our authority. Every species in the council will begin questioning our right to rule. Then we make her lose, legitimately," Krath replied, with a smile that showed his razor-sharp teeth. "We change the rules of her remaining fights. We give her opponents weapons designed specifically to kill humans. We study every recording of her battles and create strategies to counter her tactics. We make it impossible for her to win while keeping it legal." The other council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They all knew that cheating in the arena games was forbidden by the most ancient laws of their civilization, but they also knew that letting the human win would destroy everything they had built over centuries of conquest. "What about our reputation?" asked Councillor Thex of the Zelkori Empire. "If other species discover we rigged the fights against her, it will cause more problems than her victory would. We will be careful." Krath said, "The weapons will appear to be standard arena equipment. The opponents will seem like normal champions. Only we will know that everything has been designed to ensure her death. It will look like she simply faced challenges that were too great for her small human body." Meanwhile, in the arena medical facility, Dr. Yang Sulgi was treating a Krellian fighter who had been injured in the preliminary matches that preceded the main events. She worked quickly and efficiently, but her mind was focused on the conversation she had overheard between two arena guards earlier that day. The guards had been drinking and talking carelessly about orders they had received from the arena masters. Special equipment was being prepared for the human champion's remaining fights, equipment that was not supposed to exist according to arena regulations. After finishing with the Krellian patient, Silgi made her way through the medical complex until she found Hana in the recovery room where fighters rested between training sessions. The human champion was studying holographic recordings of her next opponent as she always did, but Seolgi could see the exhaustion in her eyes. "I need to tell you something important," Sulgi said, sitting down beside her. "They are going to cheat." Hana looked up from the recordings. "What do you mean?" "Your remaining fights are being rigged," Sulgi whispered. "They cannot let you win, so they are breaking their own laws to ensure you die. The weapons your opponents carry will be designed to kill humans. Specifically, the arena conditions will favor your enemies. Everything will be stacked against you." Hana felt anger building in her chest, but it was not the hot rage she had felt at the beginning of her captivity. This was something colder and more dangerous. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because someone needs to know the truth," Sulgi said. "And because I have more bad news from Earth." The words hit Hana like a physical blow. She had been avoiding thoughts of home for weeks now, focusing entirely on her training and fighting. But she could not ignore news from Earth forever. "Your brother Kim Junho was executed 3 days ago," Sulgi said quietly. "The Galactic Council claimed he was plotting rebellion, but everyone knows it was really to hurt you. They wanted to break your spirit before your final fights." Hana closed her eyes and felt something inside her chest crack. Her little brother, who had always believed she would come home safe. Her little brother, who had probably been watching her fights and cheering for her victories. He was dead because she had dared to win too many battles. Ambassador Park Minho was killed yesterday too, Seolgi continued. He was trying to negotiate for better treatment of human prisoners. The council decided that even if you win your 100 fights, they will find excuses to break their promise. They never intended to honor the agreement. The room seemed to spin around Hana, as the full weight of betrayal settled on her shoulders. Everything she had fought for meant nothing. The council had been planning to cheat from the beginning. Her brother had died for nothing. Her victories were meaningless because the aliens would never keep their word. That night alone in her luxury cell, Hana finally broke down and cried for the first time since her capture. She cried for Junho, who would never see her come home. She cried for Minho, who had died trying to help their people. She cried for all the humans who were suffering while she played games in an alien arena. But as the tears dried on her face, something harder than rage settled into her heart. If the council wanted to play dirty, she would show them what a desperate human could really do. She had been fighting by their rules, trying to win their game. But now she understood that their game was rigged from the start. Her 94th opponent entered the arena 3 days later, carrying weapons that should not have existed according to arena regulations. His armor deflected attacks that should have penetrated easily. His cybernetic enhancements made him faster and stronger than any creature she had faced before. The crowd sensed something was wrong, but they did not understand what they were seeing. This was not a fair contest anymore. This was an execution disguised as entertainment. The betting had been suspended because even the aliens knew something was not right. For the first time in 93 fights, Hana found herself losing. She was faster and smarter than her opponent, but his illegal advantages were too much for conventional tactics. Her weapons barely scratched his armor while his attacks came close to killing her several times. That was when she stopped playing by their rules. Instead of trying to fight the cyborg warrior directly, Hana began attacking the arena itself. She used her knowledge of engineering and physics to turn the environment into a weapon. She collapsed sections of the wall to create barriers. She diverted power from the lighting systems to overload his cybernetic implants. She even managed to crack one of the massive support pillars that held up the dome ceiling. The crowd went wild as they realized they were witnessing something completely unprecedented. This was not just fighting anymore. This was total warfare at its most creative and desperate level. When her opponent finally fell defeated by tactics no one had ever imagined, the entire arena fell silent. Even the Galactic Council realized they had made a terrible mistake. By cheating so obviously, they had forced the human to evolve beyond anything they had expected. Now she was not just a fighter. She was something far more dangerous. Standing over her fallen opponent, Hana looked up at the council box where she knew the aliens were watching. She spoke loud enough for the recording systems to pick up her words and broadcast them across the galaxy. "I know what you did," she said. "I know you cheated, and I know you plan to cheat again. So I have a proposal for my remaining 6 fights. Send me your best warriors all at once. I do not expect to survive, but I want the entire galaxy to see what happens when you corner a human with nothing left to lose." The council members looked at each other with growing fear. They had created something they could no longer control, and they were beginning to understand that killing her might be more dangerous than letting her live. 25 victories, 35-50 victories, and still counting. Each win made Hana stronger and more dangerous, but it also made the Galactic Council more nervous. News of the human champion spread across the galaxy like wildfire, traveling from world to world faster than the fastest ships could carry it. On slave worlds and distant systems, beings who had never heard of Earth before whispered her name in dark corners. They spoke of the small human female who refused to die in the arena, who kept finding ways to defeat opponents twice her size. The story grew with each telling until some versions claimed she could fly, or breathe fire, or kill with just a look. Even the proud warrior races who served the Galactic Council willingly began to take notice. The Vorthak military commanders who had dismissed humans as weak started studying recordings of her fights, trying to understand how such a small creature could be so effective in combat. Some of them began to worry about what other surprises the human species might have hidden. The arena masters threw everything they could think of at her genetically modified super soldiers created in secret laboratories, ancient war machines that had been stored away since the last galactic war teams of 3 or 4 fighters attacking her at the same time. Nothing worked. She adapted to every challenge they presented. Her fighting style had evolved far beyond simple survival tactics. Now she moved through the arena like a deadly dance choreographed by someone who understood violence as an art form. She could predict what her opponents would do before they did it. She turned their own weapons against them. She used the arena itself as a tool, making walls collapse at just the right moment to crush enemies, or timing her movements to use the lighting systems as distractions. Between fights, Hana was kept in luxury quarters that were more like a prison cell decorated with expensive furniture. The alien guards who watched her treated her with the kind of respect usually reserved for dangerous wild animals. They brought her the best food available and allowed her access to training equipment. But they never forgot that she was still a captive. The medical facility, where she received treatment after each fight, was run by prisoners of war from various conquered species. That was where she met Dr. Yang Sulgi, a human scientist who had been captured during the early stages of the war when Earth forces had tried to establish a research station near the galactic core. Sulgi had been forced to work as a medic in the arena, treating wounded fighters from dozens of different species. She had access to communication networks that other prisoners did not, and she had been following the news from across the galaxy. Through secret meetings in the medical bay, she began to tell Hana what her victories really meant. "Your fights are being broadcast on every world in the galaxy," Sulgi whispered as she treated. "A cut on Hana's armed slave species are watching you and beginning to believe that the Galactic Council can be beaten. There have been 3 major uprisings in the past month, and dozens of smaller ones." Hana felt a chill run down her spine. She had thought she was just fighting to survive and maybe to win freedom for Earth. But now she was learning that her battles had consequences far beyond anything she had imagined. Every time she defeated another champion, she was sending a message to billions of oppressed beings across the galaxy. "The Council is losing control," Sulgi continued. "Some of their member species are questioning whether the current leadership is strong enough to maintain order. There are rumors of secret meetings and private armies being assembled. The galaxy has not seen this level of unrest in centuries." As Hana approached her 60th victory, the nature of her opponents began to change. The arena masters were no longer sending individual fighters or even small teams. Now they were bringing out creatures and machines that had been locked away for good reasons, things that were too dangerous to use in normal circumstances. Her 62nd opponent was something called a Nethrix Shadow Hunter, a creature from the dark space between stars that could become invisible and move through solid matter. The fight lasted 4 hours, as Hana played a deadly game of hide-and-seek, using dust and sand to track something she could not see. Her 68th victory came against a collective intelligence called the Swarm, thousands of small insect-like creatures that moved and thought as one organism. She won by targeting the central controlling unit that coordinated the others, but not before they had torn her armor to pieces and covered her in small wounds. By her 70th victory, even the guards had stopped making jokes about humans. The alien species that supplied fighters to the arena began refusing to send their champions. Some claimed they needed their warriors for other purposes, but everyone knew the real reason they were afraid. The Galactic Council held emergency meetings almost daily now. Some members wanted to simply execute Hana outside the arena and claim she had died of natural causes, but they could not do that without destroying their own credibility. The sacred laws of the arena games had been established centuries ago, and breaking them would show weakness to every species in the galaxy. Other council members suggested changing the rules to make her fights impossible to win, but every proposal they made would be so obviously unfair that it would cause more unrest than her victories already had. They were trapped by their own system. Meanwhile, the luxury of Hana's quarters had become a different kind of torture. She was fed the finest foods and given the most comfortable beds, but she was more alone than she had ever been in her life. The only conversations she had were with Dr. Sulgi during medical treatments, and those had to be kept secret. She thought about her brother Kim Junho, constantly wondering if he was still alive and what he thought about her situation. She thought about Ambassador Park Minho and whether he was still trying to negotiate for her better treatment of human prisoners. She thought about Earth and whether her people even knew she was still fighting. The worst part was not knowing whether any of it mattered. Even if she won all 100 fights, would the Galactic Council keep their promise? Would they really grant humanity basic rights as a slave species, or would they find some excuse to break their word? She had no way of knowing, and no way to get answers. Her 75th victory was against something the arena masters called the Devourer, a creature that ate metal and grew larger with each bite. She defeated it by feeding it so much scrap metal that it grew too heavy to move. But the fight left her exhausted and questioning how much more she could take. That night, in her cell, Hana allowed herself to feel the full weight of what she was doing. She was 3/4 of the way to her goal, but the hardest fights were still ahead. The arena masters were getting desperate, and desperate people did dangerous things, had started this journey as a sacrifice sent to die for the entertainment of aliens. Now she was something else entirely. She was a symbol of resistance, a hope for the hopeless, and a nightmare for those who thought they ruled the galaxy. But she was also still just one human woman facing impossible odds with nothing but her wits and determination. As she drifted off to sleep, Hana wondered if she would live to see victory, number 100. And if she did, whether it would mean anything at all, or whether she would simply become another broken promise in a galaxy full of them. The only thing she knew for certain was that she would keep fighting until either she won or she died. There was no other choice left.